Hi friends, I'm Chuck and this is my beautiful bride Deb, and today what were we talking about?
Yeah, so we're talking about the dynamics of networks and what the implications are for ministry. And we're going to talk specifically about the ways that we lean. We either lean toward centralization or we lean toward distributed.
Mm-hmm. And to make kind of a distinction between the motivation to lean one way or the other, we tend to gravitate towards centralization for control or protection. That would be the good way to look at it. We tend to lean or gravitate towards distribution for more freedom or the ability to grow. So we want to give some examples of how leaning one direction or another can be good, and it can also be to a detriment in our ministry. So let's talk about leaders first. What have we experienced as far as appointed leaders or chosen leaders?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of people, in organizations appoint leaders to be over others, and which is, there's nothing, that's an amoral decision, but you're kind of making people relate to one another versus like the chosen leaders. It's, there's an agreement there. I would like this person to be my leader. I would like to lead this person. So there's kind of a different dynamic happening there, organizational versus relational. And not that organizational isn't relational, but it's just a kind of a manufactured relational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was one time where, as a part of an organization, I was in a particular region and I just floated the idea, hey, I have a better relationship with this guy. I want him to be my boss.
And he was not in that region.
Yeah, and the regional leader got a little ticked off about that. But, I felt more comfortable, and I didn't even know the regional leader. And that's where the organization had to make a decision. Do we lean towards centralized, or do we lean towards distributed? Protection or freedom? And they chose freedom. They actually let me be under a person that was not over that geography in order to preserve the relationship. So it was a good thing. So how about a set of methods and adaptive methods?
Yeah, I think here we're talking about, now we're not talking about principle, we're talking about form, okay?
Yeah.
So how you do something. And I think, with our experience, we've been in both, where there was a set method and also where there were adaptive methods, but it seems like everything kind of trends toward eventually set methods.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to, if you like to experiment and you like to try different things, you're going to find it very difficult to be in an organizational type setting, because even if there is at the beginning, like a new movement or a new, even a new organization, they might champion, adaptive methods at first, but then eventually it'll be like, this is the way we're going to do it, because it gets confusing, they want to protect, they want to all be on the same sheet of music. Yeah, so that set methods is definitely a leaning toward centralization, where adaptive methods is a leaning toward distributed.
Yeah, and we've seen that, like you said, we've seen that happen so quickly, where brand new methods, and within 6 months, it's tradition. It's in concrete and rebar. This is the way we do things. And that is good for some people and for some ministries at particular seasons, but it's not good for everyone in all seasons. So
And both and is
Yeah.
usually, I mean, you look at Jesus, like say for, evangelism or sharing the gospel, he shared so many different ways. So it's like, I don't know that you can make a case for Jesus shared the gospel one way only,
Yeah.
But, it is helpful when people are learning how to share the gospel, how to do one method, and then use that until they're comfortable. And then if they're not getting a response, or maybe it's not hitting that culture, maybe we need to do some adapting and changing.
Yeah.
So,
How about territorial versus free range?
yeah, I think, this is geography versus organic, maybe,
Yeah,
might be another
yeah.
way to put it. Like centralization definitely is more territorial. We talked earlier about, there's regions, there's leaders of regions, and they're under this and they're under that, and, there's kind of a chain of command, so to speak, versus free range. For us, this would be kind of like we call them option C missionaries, where they're not with an organization and they have the freedom to relate with different people in different mission organizations based on vision versus organization. It might be a little more difficult because, people in an organization hesitate to, network with people that are not. And so there are some disadvantages to that. But yeah, there's definitely a leaning one way or another most of the time.
We remember one time where we cut Fort Benning into pieces of the pie and assigned guys to the pieces of the pie. The problem is the disciples that you're working with don't know the lines, so they cross the boundaries, and then the guys get in big brouhaha. Hey, you're in my territory,
But I met him at the Burger King, like.
Yeah, and the gospel, the kingdom of God, is like leaven. It's gonna leaven the whole lump. It doesn't care about your, boundaries or, specific sectors in a city or specific people group. It's going to go where God wants it to go.
But on the other hand, it is good to have people focusing on geographical areas as well, because if we're going to get to, everybody everywhere in every place, you have to be thinking about geography as well.
Yeah. So even Jesus was centralized in his target. He said, I'm called to the lost sheep of Israel. So it's a both and it really depends on what God is calling you to do and what you're trying to do. So how about communications?
Yeah, so communication, it's nowadays it's more and more where it's easier to centralize communication. We've got social media, we've got websites, like more than ever before, it's leaning towards centralization in a lot of ways. But then there's also, like how do you lean toward decentralization in communication is like letting other people do their own Facebook groups or their own, messaging or their own YouTube videos. So like, the centralization is we're the ones that put out the YouTube videos, nobody else. And the decentralized or distributed would be anybody can reproduce this that wants to. And not just giving permission, but championing that.
Yeah, I remember a discussion. We had 2 Facebook groups, and there was one party that wanted to combine both Facebook groups because it was confusing, and that's centralization. And then there was another group that was saying, no, we need more Facebook groups. That's distributed or decentralized at a minimum. But it's interesting, you have reasons why you want one versus many or many versus one. And they both have their advantages and disadvantages. The more distributed that you are, the more you need to communicate because in order for the information to get to the very edges of the network, you got to over communicate. So sometimes it's good to have a centralized place where everybody can go, but you're not gonna get everybody to come there. So people are starting their own website, their own Facebook group. So yeah. All right. How about assessments?
Yeah. Assessments are fun. So the centralizing obviously is fill out this form that says you're not going to abuse children, or like whatever, like where there's kind of a every year you have to do this, or you need to fill out this monthly report, or so there's I remember with one organization it was like every year your supervisor was supposed to get with you and kind of go over your things and just kind of review how things were going, and so that would be the centralized. And then, of course, the decentralized would be...
Yeah, where you're just relationally assessing what's going on. It's the need of the hour, and you see both sides of this. A set format where you're doing an assessment. This really good because you don't miss important things because it's all in the laundry list. But what we tend to see is that when you have paid staff doing that, some take it seriously, some just pencil whip it and turn it in to get it over with. And now you have an inaccurate assessment. In fact, anytime you have paid staff and their paycheck is attached to their assessment, and this is the next one, money, you tend to get exaggerated reports and false positives because the motive is, hey, if I don't give you a good report, my paycheck is involved with this report, and I'm not going to jeopardize that,
Yeah. And I think, too, if it's relational, the person, whether they're, you don't have to ask the questions because you already know the answers. And versus centralized. I remember one time I got a message, well, we're just assuming you want to do this, and they named out what the choices were, and I'm like, they don't even care what I think, really. They're just going to do that, which is fine. It saved me from having to relate with them, which is, I guess, maybe the point. But there's definitely a difference, and the further down you get in these, the farther and farther the real connection with people tends to get when you're overly centralized.
And distributed tends to be a lot of volunteer work, where centralized would lean towards paid staff. And here's something that Deb and I have learned is good luck on getting volunteers to report in any significant way. They're just having fun doing the ministry, And so you gotta throw a wet blanket on the party when you say, hey, fill out this form. We want to know what's going on. That's why relationship is so essential. By relating. So
yeah. And if you're relating, that reports are more accurate because this guy is working with this group and this group and this group, where if you're just penciling it in, who knows?
Yeah.
And anyway, so the last one is money, and oh my.
Yeah.
This is a huge thing, especially in ministry. When you inject money, it is poison in the well, so to speak. And of course, we're speaking from negative experience. I think there's a lot of great things that money does, but a lot of times it tends to muddy the waters, I think.
Yeah. Anytime you have money, you have to have accountability. And accountability is spelled centralization, okay? And so money tends to skew things towards different motivations, and you have to write policies and procedures and make sure that the IRS regulations are being followed, and there's just this trail of tears that
well, and you're worried about
follows it.
being sued, you're worried
Yeah.
about legal coverage, there's a lot of like what, and if you, I mean, that would be super centralized. Now, on the other hand, with the distributed, if there's no money or very, very little attachments with money, then it's like you don't have to search for a motive as much.
Yeah. They're doing it because they want to do it. And, there's a lot of ministries, or should I say ministers, that Christianity is a get-rich-quick scheme for them. And, can you tell I'm jaded?
Well, we did talk to somebody who was in seminary once, and we were asking about the other people in his classes, and he's like, yeah, they see it as an easy job. You just work on Sundays and Wednesday nights, and you get a paycheck. And so it's like, that's an interesting, like, we don't think about that. We think everybody's got good motives when they go to seminary, but anyway.
Yeah, anytime you're beholding to a paycheck or to resources, your ministry is held hostage. So you really, could be, really need to be careful. This is why Deb and I give anonymously. We don't want to set up this motivation that's contingent on how much money we give,
or that we're giving.
So anyways, those are some examples, and you can probably round us out. We're leaning towards the distributed,
and you can definitely tell our leanings here.
But there is a point of no return, right? You can go so far, lean so far one direction that you fall in that direction. Can you think of any example?
Yeah, we were overseas once, and there was some folks, I think they had been part of an organization, but I don't know that they were at that point. But it was like, there were some young military folks that were involved in their ministry, and they actually were like pairing off people to get married together. And it was like, in a way it was anarchy, but it was super controlling, which is kind of, but it's like, as far as organization, they went so far as they wanted to do their own thing that they, which ironically they wanted to be super centralized, but with themselves being the control people.
They dictated who can and who can't get married. And we do that in order to protect people. But it also gives us that adrenaline high of control, and it's super dangerous, leaning too far towards distributed, you have judges. Everybody did what was right in their own eyes. So you have to be careful and pay attention to these things, or you're going to slide off in these directions, and people can smell it. I think one of the most contemporary issues is a very controversial subject, COVID vaccines. There's part that wants to protect our society, and so they're going way over on the centralized. And then there are people that say, no, you're not putting that in my body. And they're going way over on the distributed. And there's probably some middle ground there where, hey, if you want the vaccine, get it. If you don't, we understand. And, we can't be despots, and we can't have anarchy. So, All right. I think that about covers it. And if you want to round out in a civil manner and round out our discussion in the comments below, please do. All right. We love you. God bless you. And until next time, keep following Jesus.